No, you're fine. So, right now, welcome everybody. This is number four. I think it is 7:30. Oh, yes, it is 7:30. Oh my goodness, this is Google Hangout number four, Lessons from a Life in Magic. And tonight, I've got a special guest with me, my friend Diane Beck. She is over in California. And Diane and I met at a networking event a few years ago, a little over a year ago, and she's been taking lessons from a. How would you describe Bo, Diane?
Geez. Well, Bo is a speaker. He's a storyteller. He's a former a former NFL football player, right? So that's
Right,
Bo Eaton, and but also Roger Love,
right,
the voice coach of
absolutely,
the Stars and many famous singers and also speakers. But I'll
awesome.
just leave it at that.
So yeah,
Google.
and tonight I thought that it would be cool to have you on because you have been going through this, and tonight we're talking about how to use our voice on stage and how that can enhance a performance. And the other night we were actually doing a Google Hangout. And we were talking about how when we're in interviews, that your voice is also a very powerful tool. So I thought it kind of worked in, everything dovetailed very nicely in together tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen yet again. We're going to jump into this, and Diane, feel free. Again, we're just having an open, fun conversation for anybody viewing, whether we're live or this is the recorded. If you want to ask questions that I can answer for you, go to my website, theversatileperformer.com. On the contact page, there's a form there. You can fill it out, ask a question, and I'll be sure to answer them during the live Google Hangouts every Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or I guess this is Eastern Daylight Time. I'm not really sure how that works. I wish we would get away from the Eastern Daylight Time, the daylight savings. It seems like a total waste. Okay. I'm sharing my screen right now. I'm going to present this to everybody. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. Diane, can you see that?
I can. Yes, I can.
Awesome. Okay, so again, tonight, what we're learning on this webinar, it's all about developing our voice and really using our voice to enhance our performances. So I say we dive right in. So one of the big questions when I first got into performing, and maybe this is a question that you had in your back of your mind, Diane, too, was what makes a professional different? I started out performing as a magician, and the first professionals that I really saw were on TV. And in the back of my mind, I was like, what really makes these guys different from anybody else that's out there doing it, right? And one of the main things that I've learned over my 22 years of performing, and I've performed in a lot of different situations over those 22 years. I've done theme parks, I've worked on the street doing busking, I've performed at a wake, birthday parties, I've done the whole gamut. And
Wait a minute.
what
You
I've learned,
magic at a wake?
yeah,
Sorry.
one of the very first gigs, well, I shouldn't say one of the very first gigs, but I had booked a local restaurant in northern Kentucky, and there was a family that had come in and had seen me perform, and their uncle loved magic. He
Oh,
died, and they had me come in at his wake to perform for the guests because he loved magic so much. He used to do like little magic tricks for his nieces and nephews, and they thought it would be really cool to have a magician at his wake. So
that's
yeah,
really sweet. That's a sweet touch.
yeah, it's a different gig, really. It's you're kind of on your tiptoes there, but it was cool. And one of the things over all of the years that I've been performing, um, it's not the tricks and it's not the effects that we do, and regardless of what it is that you're doing on stage, whether you're just telling a story, whether you're being a magician, you're a juggler, some kind of variety artist. It's not the tricks or the effects that really set us apart. It's everything that surrounds those effects. I always like to think about it in terms of it's the moments in between, or it's the things in between what we think that we're actually doing. So if I'm performing magic, it's not so much the magic that's really setting me apart, even though that's important and you need to be good at what you're doing. Obviously you need to be prepared, but it's everything around that that really makes you a professional. It's ultimately you, right? It's really boils down to all of those intangible things that make you you, that make you into a professional. So the question tonight that we're talking about is, why is the voice important, right? And I've kind of boiled it down. There's just a few things that I thought we could talk about tonight, and those are, it's a way to connect with and manage an audience, right? It's outside of like physically managing an audience, like moving them around or clapping your hands, doing something physical to manage an audience. You can use your voice to great effect when you're managing an audience. And obviously it's to connect, because you're communicating. It's one of the best tools that we have for communicating outside of our body language. And our voice is really, it's amazing because it's one tool, but we can use it for a whole lot of different things. We can emphasize points, we can de-emphasize a point. Like if we don't want to bring attention to something, we can just, make an offside comment that's in a little bit different voice than what we would normally be performing with. We can create and release tension, which I think is a really interesting aspect of how to change your voice to create that tension in a moment or release it. Timing, pacing, modulating the voice are all really important aspects. And the last point is, it's really one of the storyteller's greatest tools. I remember reading a book a few years ago on storytelling, and it talked about how important the voice was. And when I was thinking about doing this particular topic in this particular Google Hangout, that book really stood out. And I believe it was a woman who had written the book, and she was talking about how important, even though physicality, we think sometimes the story is important, we sometimes think our behavior, our physicality is important, and those things are important. From her perspective, she thought that the voice was one of the storyteller's greatest tools. So anything that you want to add to that, Diana, like what you think maybe about the voice?
Yeah. So you were talking about what makes someone a professional, and I assume you mean a professional magician.
Yeah, professional. Well, I think a professional in any aspect that you're on stage.
Okay.
Maybe.
So what came to mind when you said that is, I was envisioning two people. One is a professional and one is brand new novice, right? And say
Right.
they're each doing the same exact trick, and it's not called trick, effect. Sorry.
It can be, right.
They're each doing the same exact effect, and say it's a very simple one, right? It's not very elaborate.
Right.
But how would someone be able to tell the difference between who is the professional and who is the novice if they're both doing the same exact simple effect, right? So what would an audience member look at and observe and notice to make them feel, yeah, that one's the professional, right?
Right.
And I think it's the context of how they frame the situation and all these elements that you're talking about, including the voice, right? Is they are somehow projecting a feeling that you, as the audience member, absorb. Right. And I think it's the body language, it's how they set the effect up, how they set it up, deliver it, frame it, the body language, and the voice. Right. And I think so that I believe that is so true. Right. And their demeanor and their behavior, all like everything around it. So when you said, yeah, it's really essentially you, it is, because, in all kinds of scenarios, people can do the same exact thing, but it's really the essence of you and how you communicate that differentiates you.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, great point. All right, I want to jump back to sharing the screen here. Okay, let's do that. Great. So, I was thinking this next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about different ways of using the voice, right? So, one of the ways is that we can speak softly, right? And speaking softly, especially from the stage, it can create a couple of different feelings, because it's all about creating that experience for your audience, right? And when you speak softly, it definitely brings the energy down. It's not as, boisterous, and I'll get to the other aspect of this, the other side of the coin, but it definitely brings the energy down, and it can draw an audience in. So it's one of the techniques that I learned street performing, that if I wanted my audience to really pay attention, I could create emphasis on something by speaking softly. And one of the things that is kind of interesting, it worked really well with children, especially when children are getting a little loud and they're getting, rambunctious before a show. You can start the show by speaking very softly. And it's an interesting technique in that the children kind of pick up on it, and they'll start shushing each other so that they can hear the performer. Because a lot of times we think that the way to control that situation is to get loud and get, extremely loud and say, children, listen up, it's time to listen. But if you start your show and you're speaking softly, you can draw that audience in and make them pay more attention to what's going on. It works, like I said, it works with children, but it works really well with adults as well. And you can create importance by speaking softly, almost as like, I think about when you're speaking very intently with a person, you draw them in close. I think about movies and the way movies are framed, and like it could be a really key scene in a film, and a character speaks very softly, very slowly, to create an importance about whatever it is in that scene. It creates that tension, and it creates the emphasis on that moment as well. And the last point in this about speaking softly, I was thinking again about the storytelling. And I've worked with storytellers a lot through the years. I've worked with ventriloquists that tell stories. I've worked with magicians that tell stories. And I've worked just with straight up storytellers. And they create this illusion of being small. I remember this storyteller years ago. I used to perform in a show at the Cincinnati Zoo. And the storyteller would create this character of a small boy, and like a little tiny boy, and he would use his voice, and he would get really quiet and really soft, and he made this, in your mind you saw him get smaller, almost like thinking about the stories that he would tell when he would become this character. In your mind, you could imagine this character being very tiny, very small, very fragile, maybe not the right word, but that's kind of, that feeling that you got. Anything that you want to add there, Diane?
Yes.
Right.
I loved your example about the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just get back to that briefly, when you were talking about the kids being boisterous and changing it up and getting soft and slow, right? Because I think we have a tendency to want to match the other person.
Right.
right? So if people are like really boisterous and then you're boisterous too, you're like, be quiet, and I'm going to be loud and be quiet. Then it just turns into this tug of war of like upping each other louder and louder and louder. But when you change it up, it's like, oh,
Right.
what? You know, it really draws the attention. And, you know, as you said, you know, you get soft and then you get slower. And then it really, by using your voice, you don't have to say, wait a minute, you know, I'm about to say something very, you know, important, right? People feel it. They feel it without
Absolutely. Yeah.
understanding why. But then all of a sudden they listen up. And I think people forget that the voice is a tool. You know, they think, well, this is my voice. This is how I talk, right? And
Right.
and you can determine how you want people to feel and react to some degree, right? By
Sure.
how you decide to use your voice. Like, I feel it's a decision. You could make it a conscious decision, or you could be totally unconscious and just bloop, 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 bloop.
Right. And I think, like, you know, back in the beginning, when we were talking about the difference between the professionals, I think that the professional is really very conscious about all the tools that they're using, everything that they bring to the table. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's
Like
it's
any element that is adding to the whole equation, always looking for, where is that extra edge? Where is that something that I could really mold this experience?
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Anything else, or do you think we can move on? I know you have no idea what's coming next, which is awesome.
Yeah, let's
So I'm gonna
continue.
go. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the slide here. I should be presenting. Great. So the other side of the speaking softly is speaking loudly, and speaking loudly on stage is not yelling. And I wanted to make that distinction very clear. When I think or when I speak about speaking loudly, it's projecting. It's speaking from the diaphragm, being able to fill a room with your voice, but not straining your vocal cords. This is one of the things early on, especially when I first started busking, uh, when I was working at the Cincinnati Zoo. One of my duties, I was a character actor. I played kind of the silly guy in this show, and one of my jobs during the summer was to be on the side, sort of barking to the audience or to the zoo guests as they were walking down the hill towards our amphitheater, to let them know that there was a show getting ready to start. And they could hear me by the end of the summer. When I first started, I was screaming at the top of my lungs, shredding my vocal cords, wasting all of my energy. Just, it takes so much energy to yell and try to project your voice out. But then when you learn how to actually project your voice, you don't use as much energy. Your breathing becomes better. You're really using your diaphragm to project your voice out. And by the end of that first summer of shows, and I think we were doing, it was either 2 or 3 shows a day that we were doing, and I would have to do this barking for the like 10 minutes before each show. By the end of the summer, they could hear me up the hill all the way into the next encounter over, from just the volume of my voice. So speaking loudly is projecting, it's not yelling, and there is a difference. And the 3 points that I talk about here that I captured is that it increases energy. So again, if you're modulating your voice, if you're moving from speaking softly to speaking loudly, you can create a feeling of increasing the energy in a group, and really get them the energetic level up. You can create attention by uh, making a very loud, short burst. You can create surprise in the same way. I think, again, in storytelling, where I'm trying to remember how he would set this scene up, but the storyteller at the zoo, and I blanking on his name. I keep trying to remember his name and I keep blanking on his name, but he would start out and he would talk about this little boy waking up in the middle of the night and gently lifting the covers off of his bed, gently sliding to the floor so that his parents couldn't hear that he was awake. He would tiptoe over to the door, open the door, and walk. He was walking into the living room or something, and he would crash into something all of a sudden. And this moment where he would crash into something, he would get really loud, really vocal, and it just created this surprise. It created this energy level that was so different from how he was bringing you into the story. It really created this illusion. And again, it can create control. And when I was busking, you can really call someone out, bringing attention, bringing control to someone, either moving them back if they're getting too close to you, because sometimes that happens. People want to creep up. They just keep wanting to get closer and closer. So it's a way of creating control. And again, the opposite side of speaking softly, you can create the illusion of you being bigger than what you are. When your voice gets full, your body language can change. And again, I think all of these go hand in hand. They're not separate. So physicality is important when we're talking about a lot of these things, but it creates that illusion of being big. So speaking loudly is a really powerful tool as well. Diane, do you want to jump in there?
I love the distinction you make between projecting versus yelling, because I think some people think volume is volume and there is a difference. And so when they're getting feedback that they're not being heard, they think yell.
Yes.
Yeah, some individuals. And first of all, if you don't have a microphone on, or maybe you're just in normal normal conversation, a large amount of people don't realize how quiet they are because they're not, breathing right, and they're not projecting. They may be all stuck up in their chest or keeping it small up here, and it's just like not coming out. It's not right. And what happens is, for instance, myself, I will ask someone if they will speak up. I can't hear you.
Right.
I'll only do that. But if that's their default voice, I'll only do that maybe once or twice. And then there are people who don't even do that. And what happens is they're dismissed.
Right.
I can't hear you. It's too hard. It's too much of a strain. Right. And so it's really important to project. And then also not yell, because if it feels like yelling, it feels very abrasive. You're getting the volume, but it doesn't feel good, right? So record yourself, maybe.
That's a really good tip. A really good tip. It's hard though sometimes. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm no expert at this. I'm just a student of this. So I record myself in video and audio, and sometimes am appalled by what I hear, but I'm working on it, and I'm more conscious of what I'm doing wrong and practicing getting better.
Right. And I think that's a really big key, because we do want to constantly, and no matter how many shows you've done, no matter how many times you've been on stage, we can always get better. There's always places for us to improve. And I know even my own performances, as much as I really disliked watching myself perform or even listen to myself, it was a really key learning tool, because you do get a sense. And I think it's important to not just record yourself when you're practicing, but get someone to come out and get you, record you while you're actually performing. So especially from like the back of the audience, so that you can get a sense of what people are experiencing at the very, all the way back at the farthest extent away from you. So you get a sense of how loud you need to be. If you're not working, like you said, with a microphone, if you're working with a microphone, obviously you're not going to be projecting, and hopefully the sound system, they'll be able to hear you. Yeah, I think that's a really important key, is to record yourself, because you don't know. And when we're on stage, we don't really have a good barometer of what the very back person, if you're busking, and you notice people maybe 2 or 3 lines deep if you're working in a really busy tourist area, and the very back people in your audience keep moving. If you're doing like a 15-20 minute show, that may be a good indicator that they can't hear you if they're just leaving, or if you see people trying to move closer around the edges and create more of a horseshoe around you. So
And I think when
absolutely.
you record yourself, try recording yourself at different distances
Good point.
from the recorder, right? There was this,
Yep.
I was at an event and Roger Love, the voice coach, just sounds much smaller than what he really is, but I'll just use that word. Guru was on stage, right? And here he is, he's demonstrating how to project your voice. And it's on a stage at a very large conference room, banquet room, right? And he is speaking at a certain volume where everyone in the back of the room is raising their hand because he asked, like, can you hear me okay, clearly, right? And then he had someone on stage right next to him. And he asked her, am I yelling? And she's like, no, not at all. So what he did was he just talked and talked and talked at the same volume and then went on stage and walked all the way down to the back. And you could see he didn't change the volume of his voice at all. But it was palpable up close and you could hear it like all the way in the back. And one last is, I think, sorry, I think one good indicator is if you're yelling, your voice, your throat will probably be sore.
Yeah.
That's a good indicator. And if you're projecting and breathing properly, you should be able to speak for a good while with no problem.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, when I first started, before I really learned how to project my voice, yelling, my vocal cords, it felt like someone had set fire to my vocal cords. They were just shredded and just brutal. But once you learn how to project, and again, speaking from the diaphragm and creating that volume of sound, like you said, it's palpable even up close. Maybe not like right in somebody's ear, obviously, but they don't feel that you're yelling. They feel that you're just speaking at volume. It's so key. If a performer doesn't know how to project, and if their microphone fails, I've seen this happen before, where a microphone fails and they don't have a backup, or they just have to keep going. What do you do? And having that in your back pocket of like, oh yeah, I learned how to project my voice. I can fill this room of 1,000 people with my voice, no problem. So cool. So that was pretty much, I think I'm going to go back to the slide here. I think. So again, questions, guys. If you're watching this on the replay, go to my website. Ask questions on the contact page. There's a form there, and you can ask questions. And each week, I can answer questions and respond to comments and create a bigger dialogue. Diane, any questions, any comments that you feel like maybe we didn't cover, or you want to jump in with? If not, no worries. I know I'm throwing you on the spot here.
You know
anything
how
that you can think of when it comes to what's that?
I said, you know how spontaneous I am.
Yeah, exactly. But if not, no worries. So I'm going to throw up, if you want to join these weekly hangouts and you're watching on the replay, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Wherever you're watching this, just go to YouTube, click the little YouTube link, and it'll take you to a YouTube site, and subscribe to the channel. That way each week you'll get notified when I put up the new event. You'll see that link come up that we're going to host a new event, and it's every Wednesday night at 7:30 for the time being, and we may change this time. I'm not sure that this is the right time for us. We may go a little bit later in the future, but if you'd like to subscribe to the YouTube channel, you can do it there. And each week on the blog, I'll be putting these up as well. So after we do them live, we go to the blog with the with the recording. You can go to theversatileperformer.com, sign up for the email there, and you'll get a weekly reminder, one in the morning, one in the evening, about an hour before we do the webinar or the hangout, so that you're aware. Follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @JWethington. That's at the letter J, and it's spelled WETHINGTON, @JWethington on Twitter. Engage with me there, talk to me, chat with me. I'm still learning my way around Twitter, as Diane and I like to have conversations about this. We won't go into it heavily here, but Twitter is a great platform. She knows it, I know it. She likes it a little bit more than I do. She's used to using it. I'm learning to love it. And you can also connect with me on Facebook, Jason.Wethington on Facebook, and you can send me private messages. I'm on a couple of the different magician boards there, and trying to help out each week, answer different questions and things like that. And for anyone who's interested in finding Diane, Diane has a really cool company. It's called The Hired Techie, and you can find her at The Hired Techie. That's TheHiredTechie.com. She's also on Twitter at The Hired Techie, right? Did I get that right? Yes, The Hired Techie. And you help people that are looking for jobs in the technology industry. That's really your forte, right, Diane?
Correct. People who have great technical skills, but not so great at the process of getting the job offer.
Right. And you're working with them. Tell me.
Sorry. No, because there's some questions I wanted to ask you, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to ask, say early on, what did you alarmingly realize about your voice? Like, what was one of the first things that you noticed when you said, all right, I'm going to observe, and I want to be more conscious of my voice, the current state, what's happening? What was the most alarming thing you noticed, and how did you realize this, and what did you do?
That's a really good question. I remember early on, I struggle. And we've talked about this before, I'm an introvert by nature, and my stage nerves were so bad, it would come out in my voice. And a lot of this happens to a lot of magicians. When we first start performing and we go to perform an effect for somebody, our hands will tremble a little bit because we're nervous. That was also coming out in my voice, and I could hear it, that I didn't feel confident in my voice, and I felt like I wouldn't be able to finish a sentence. I wouldn't be able to speak all the way through a sentence without feeling like I was losing my voice, and I would have to strain to get the rest of the sentence out, So that was one of the first early indicators. And again, I felt that my voice was trembling a little bit when I spoke. And even after I got over the nerves aspect, I felt that I was, especially when I was performing an effect that I'd done a lot, I felt that I was monotone because I knew what was coming, and I wasn't really modulating my voice at all. And I wanted to create more of a sense of a conversation instead of just having a one-sided, almost lecture to an audience,
Right.
So I wanted to overcome that. But the first early indicator was definitely the nerves aspect, and not being able to really use my breath effectively to control and modulate my voice. So yeah, nerves was the biggest in the beginning. It was nerves. It was that stage fright. So,
and what did you do when you're thinking, okay, my voice sounds a little shaky, I'm not getting enough air to get all my words out, or I'm not taking a breath? Like, what did you consciously decide to do to try and solve that?
I went to a voice coach. I It's
Yes.
true. I went to a voice coach. I went to someone who I went to somebody who knew what they were doing, who had used their voice. And I asked them for advice, and I ended up hiring them. And I think I worked with them for about, oh gosh, trying to think, maybe 3 months. I worked with them I think maybe once a week. Trying to remember back, I think they were once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, and we would do exercises, vocal exercises. Uh, they were a singing coach, is what their actual position. That's what they taught people, was how to sing. But I didn't necessarily want to learn how to sing. I just wanted to learn how to use my voice properly.
Right.
But that's what I did. I ended up going with a voice coach, and that changed the game in a very big way for me. So,
Absolutely, yeah. And one last question, if I may.
of course.
What
Oh.
what would be your one or biggest takeaway that you would give the people watching right now on what they could do to use their voice as a tool, or be more conscious, or add this as one of the elements to their effect or effects?
Right. I would say the biggest takeaway, and I've seen this so many times with magicians, when using your voice, slow down. Like, it's such a simple thing, but
Mm.
I've never, in fact, a friend of mine, an acquaintance, a magician up in Canada, kind of famous magician named Jay Sankey. He's also a stand-up comic. He posted a blog maybe 2 weeks ago, and he talks about this a little bit. And he said, I've of all the years of performing, and I can testify to this as well. In all the years of performing, I've never said to another magician, everything was great, but you talked too slow. Never, ever have I said that. However, I've walked away from a performance, and a magician has asked me, "Hey, what did you think?" And I said, great. I love the effects. I love your routining. Your costuming is great. You need to slow down. We couldn't understand what you were saying. You rushed through every bit of dialogue that you had. So I think slowing down, and to combine with that, don't forget to breathe, right? When you're on stage, remember to breathe. Because you think, oh, I just do that naturally. When we're on stage, I don't think that it's very natural. We forget. We get caught up in everything else, especially early on when you're just starting to present whatever it is that you're doing on stage. Breathing is such a key element, and that helps slow your breathing down, or slow your speech down as well. Just remembering to take those breaths, right?
Awesome.
Yeah. So those would be the biggest takeaways, I think. Slow down, everybody. Slow down and take a breath. Don't forget to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. It's like meditating in a sense. Like when you first learn how to meditate, right? They're like, okay, spend a minute, right? Concentrating on your breath, following your breath in through the nose and then out through your mouth. Where does the breath begin? Where does it end? And just being conscious of our breathing, that helps tremendously on stage as well. So, yeah, those two things. What about you? What would you say that the biggest takeaway that you've had from your time as a student so far, learning about being on stage and using your voice? What would you say, to put you on the spot?
So I went to a voice coach as well, right?
Right.
Took a lot in, and then also have been doing voice exercises at home on the CD I have, and then also recording myself, right? But as you mentioned, it's one thing how you sound when you record yourself, because you're just like, I don't know, I'm on my best behavior, versus
Right.
when you're live, and also in conversation with people, right?
Yeah.
When you're not in presenting mode. And it's so horrible, but I'll tell you what happened.
I love it. We're getting the nitty gritty now.
Yeah, we're into the nitty gritty. So just being honest here, ego aside, it was at one of these events for The Voice, and it was during, it was like afterwards. We had a long break, and me and one of the attendees, this woman, we went to we went to a bar and had a cocktail until they were starting up again, and we had lunch together also earlier in the day, and I kept saying, like, because she was sitting right next to me in the booth at lunch, and I kept saying, I can't hear you. Can you please speak up? Because what was happening is I couldn't hear her, and I would just kind of nod my head. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. I want to know what she's saying, but I can't hear her. And I probably asked her 3 times over lunch to speak up, and I can't hear you. Could you speak louder? And sitting right next to me. So when we were having cocktails, or one cocktail, I asked her, and she asked me, based on our training that we were getting during this conference, about how we perceive the other person's voice. Okay, and it was a real eye-opener. And so I was telling her about the voice and how it makes me feel very annoyed, because I've already asked her 3 times and I can't hear her, and I'm not going to ask again. So just whatever, keep talking. I really can't participate in this conversation, right? But what she told me was that I'm too jarring, and she just physically, like, it's just like, get away, because I'm just there's too much grr in the tone of my voice, right? It's not one of these soft voices that, is very kind and soothing. I'm just right? And
it's a lot of yin in your voice.
Right? So again, not so. I have to be conscious of adding more yang to my voice, like softening it up and not making it so abrasive sounding, so that it's more welcoming to people. And so she was saying how she really just felt like I was attacking her during lunch with my voice, because of how, because I speak louder than she does, but also our voices are so different. Hers was just, to me, it was very quiet and soft, and I can't hear, and I'm just straining. But her experience was and I think we were both maybe at the opposite ends of the spectrum, and it was hilarious, but a huge eye-opener. And by the end of it, it was like, thank you for your honesty, right? And then what we did was we practiced in conversation, and then I asked her, and vice versa, how do you like me now? And
That's so great.
So it was so awesome, because she would say, by the end of it, she said, I like this so much better. It's so much easier to have a conversation with you with your voice like that. And vice versa. So the just honest feedback.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really amazing and important thing too, is if you have someone, and being in a group like you are, it gives you that opportunity to get that feedback that you might not, like as a solo performer, you might not be able to travel with a friend, but any opportunity that you might have to get someone that you know that you trust,
Right.
maybe another performer or someone in the same field as you that could come to a show and listen and give you that open, honest feedback. Really, really key. That's awesome.
And people who I know very well, and I know they're very skilled at what they do, but their voice is too, I don't know, it's just something. And I'm thinking, if I didn't know you, I would not buy what you're selling.
Oh, wow. Right on. Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And so it's how you use your voice and how people perceive you. Just the smallest changes, having an awareness and practicing can make a huge difference in how you're perceived.
That's
so I'm
awesome.
trying
Yep.
not to be so.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, I'm going to bring back up the screen one last time so that if anybody is watching on the replay, again, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're coming up on the end of this Google Hangout with myself, Jason Withington, and my friend Diane Beck was here hanging out with us. So awesome to have you here. So again, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go to the website, theversatileperformer.com. Sign up for the emails you get this week. We've got one of my signature effects that I've been performing for a long time. It's a pen or cigarette through quarter effect that when you sign up for our email that I'm giving that away for free just as a thank you. You'll get weekly reminders of these hangouts and anything else that we're doing at theversatileperformer.com. Engage with me on Twitter. Again, I'm at J Wethington, the letter J, WETHINGTON, and connect with me on Facebook. And again, my friend Diane is the Hired Techie, TECHIE.com, and she's also on Twitter at the Hired Techie. So you can connect with her there if you're in the tech industry and you're looking for tips and good information on how to position yourself more effectively in the marketplace. She's an expert at helping people do that. So thanks again, guys, for watching. What's that, Diane? Go ahead.
I was going to ask, what's next? Are you going to give us a teaser as far as anything else you have coming up in the queue?
Absolutely. Next week, we're going to be talking about body language. Sort of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about this week.
Nice segue. I didn't know this was
right,
coming.
that was beautiful. No, you had no idea that slide was even there, but absolutely. Next week, we're going to be talking about our body language. And again, like we were saying before, how these things, there's no real separation in anything that we do when we're performing. And again, as professionals and being the most amazing performers that we can be, it's really about combining all these separate aspects into one cohesive whole. And that is next week. It's all about our body language. So that's the beautiful segue. Thank you so much, Diane, for that. That was great. So we'll see you guys next week. Diane, thanks so much again for being here. It was really awesome having this conversation and being able to play back and forth with you. It was really cool.
This was fun.
Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. Hey, see everybody next week. Take care.